more than Jesus or more than God. Television has that power to create icons. And so Sheen was taken off television. They sent him, I don't know where, some place like Rochester, New York, and he was never heard from again. Billy Graham, I'm sort of rambling here. It's such a vast subject. Billy Graham, Jesus said, doesn't Jesus say, wherever two or three are gathered in my name, there I am. Now, Billy Graham thinks that wherever 30 million people are gathered in Jesus' name, Billy Graham is there. The point, just to be simple, because we don't have as much time as we would need, that here's the point that I was trying to make. That, well, first of all, television always tries to provide people with what they want. And enduring religions do not do that. Religion provides people with what they need, not with what they want. And so you have a clash of two different institutions. And if you've looked at the kinds of religious programming they have on television, mostly done by evangelicals, it's strictly, it's done like any television show. It's just organized like a television show, as, by the way, are news shows. It's always interested me. If someone can explain this to me, I would really appreciate it. Why on news shows do they have music? Has it ever struck you as odd that they're about to give you stories about an earthquake in Chile and a huge fire in Chicago, and it all begins with music, which stays throughout the show as a sort of motif? Well, maybe, it's just a question. I don't know the answer to it. Someone else. Yes, sir.
In Technopoly, you argue that the courts are the last refuge of an institution which can exclude information from people which are fragmented by too much of it. What I'd like to know is, in the wake of the O.J. Simpson case, do you still consider that to be the case?
This question is about my discussion in a different book called Technopoly about the courts, where I use the example that a courtroom is a place which very carefully limits the kinds of information it will allow. And it's, that's why lawyers jump up and say, I object to someone's talking about this. And then the judge decides whether that's permissible or not. And then the questioner asked about the, about O.J. Simpson and the trial. By the way, did you read his most recent statement, his interview? He said, I think it was in Vanity Fair, if I killed her, it would be because I loved her too much. Let's just slide over that one. And here's my view, very personal view. If you go back about 5 years, New York State was one of only about 3 or 4 states that did not allow a television in the courtroom. And the New York State legislature passed what's called a sunset law. That is a law that that expires after a certain amount of time. In this case, 18 months. So for 18 months in New York State, you could bring TV cameras into the courts, and the then Governor Mario Cuomo set up a commission to study the effects of this. And I was appointed to that commission, and we did study it, and we did interesting research. The reason the legislature gave for allowing it was that they said Americans were insufficiently knowledgeable and respectful of our judicial system. If you allow the average person to see what goes on in the courtroom, their knowledge and their respect will increase. Here's an interesting sidebar on that. Of course, we found out after 18 months, no one knew anything more or had greater respect for the courts. In fact, respect had decreased. But people who were interviewed knew some interesting things. Like people would say, well, I know that lawyers are officers of the court. Say, hey, that's true. How did you know this? They would say, well, on Law and Order, or they'd mention some other television show. They say, oh, they mention that all the time. We did find out, of course it's terrifying, that 1 out of every 3 people we interviewed, because this is New York State, I'm sure it's different in Michigan, but 1 out of every 3 who had been on a jury, that's important, 1 of every 3 who had served on a jury did not know that a person is to be considered innocent until proven guilty, which terrified us because certainly on any felony case, that's almost the first thing the judge would tell the jury. So, but I voted, in the end we voted, our commission, and we voted against allowing cameras in the courts, and then when the law expired, the legislature was fairly impressed with our arguments and said, well, we'll pass the law just for another year and we'll do more study. Then it expired, and then they said, oh, the hell with it, let the cameras come in. So in New York State now, I'm sure it's true in Michigan, right? Can't you have cameras in the courts? I think maybe we have time for one more. I thought I saw someone back there, and then we'll. Is there someone in the balcony? Sounds like a, what? That balcony. Oh, there's, thank you.
The media is basically owned by a few individuals and corporations. I don't think Disney or General Electric or Time Warner, I think they'd like to ban this book, if anything.
Well, I mean, my answer, you asked this of an American, right? And you know, an American's answer to any intractable problem is schools. Isn't this the most American thing? If there's too much bigotry, let the schools have teach tolerance. If kids are cracking cars, let them teach safe driving. If young women are getting pregnant out of wedlock, let's have sex education. We Americans like to give all these problems to our schools, and for the most part, doesn't work very well.